Hello there, welcome back to Jennie Designs with Paper. Thank you so much for stopping by my channel today. I'm going to do a little heat embossing and resisting, so get comfy and let's get crafty. I am going to create a wedding card with this altenew peony bouquet stamp set. This is a layering stamp set, but I'm only going to be using the outline images to do some heat embossing. I'm going to be embossing on this dark blue cardstock with rose gold Simon Says Stamp embossing powder. I will do all my inking in Versamark ink, and I will do a lot of prep work on this cardstock with my Rabbit Hole Designs anti-static powder bag. I am going to score the card base, but I'm not going to fold it yet. This is a one-layer card, and there's lots of masking involved to create the look I'm going for. A few weeks ago, I created a mixed media tag using the components of one of my friend's wedding invitations, and this is going to be her wedding card, actually. In fact, her wedding will be over by the time you see this video. And I'm going to replicate the design of that wedding invitation with this stamp set on this cardstock. So I've taken this little 6-inch ruler and added it to the bottom of my MISTI so I can pop that panel up evenly to stamp off the edge of my card base. This is going to be a one-layer card. No other layers involved except for the liner on the inside to write on. I have prepared the cardstock with the anti-static powder tool, and I've inked up that stamp with the Versamark ink. I'm just going to use this paper towel that was on my desk because it was on my desk to move my hand around. I am going to sprinkle the rose gold embossing powder on the cardstock. I'm going to let it sit for a few seconds, and then I can tap it off and heat set that. And I'm going to be heat setting after each stamping because I will be using masks and layering things. So I'm going to just put my card base back into my MISTI, and I want to add a leaf and, well, there's 2 leaves in this stamp set, but I need the mask, and because I have used this stamp set before, I have some masks already cut. There were some I needed to recreate to make this card, but I did not leave that in the video because that's boring. How to use the mask is way more interesting than watching me create the mask. And I have other videos on how to create a mask for one-layer stamping. So I'm going to put the mask down. I'm going to ink up these 2 stamps with that Versamark ink. I'm going to put a little bit of pressure on the lid of my MISTI. And before I sprinkle the embossing powder on, I'm going to remove the mask. And same steps as before. Let it sit for a few seconds. Remove the excess powder. Put it all back together and then heat set it. And the more layers I do, the faster my heat tool gets hot, so the faster the heat embossing goes. And some of it, because of the lighting in my office, to remove a lot of the shadows and stuff, it's going to be a little bit difficult to see. I do have some pictures at the end where it's a little bit easier to see. But anyway, I'm going to put that mask back down. It is losing some of its stick because of the anti-static powder tool. But I'm going to add this small blossom to the cluster. I've decided I don't like it hanging off the front of that big blossom, so I'm going to hang it off of this leaf. I do need to then pull the mask for the leaf back in, and as well as the mask for the large blossom. So once I get that down, I can pick the stamp up with my MISTI lid. I can ink that up. I did not put anti-static powder down this time, which I should have because I've been putting my fingers all over the cardstock. But luckily and gratefully, I didn't have any stray embossing powder hanging around. I'm just going to, again, repeat the steps, right? Add the powder, let it sit, shake it off, and then heat emboss the image. Heat embossing is fantastic. It's almost like card making magic because you stamp this image, you put the embossing powder down, and with a little bit of heat from your heat tool, it's like voila, shiny happiness. It is awesome. I am using the mask for this other branch of leaves, which is really difficult because the stem is like one line. It's not a thick stem. So I had to create this mask very carefully, but it worked, and I can now add another blossom or bloom to that bottom left-hand corner, which means I need to put my ruler back in because I am stamping off. And I use that ruler as a placeholder. Like if my cardstock shifts, I know where I can put it back in at. So I'm going to ink up that blossom. I am putting more anti-static powder back on my cardstock because, again, when you're heat embossing, your fingers have oils and stuff on them naturally. And if you have manipulated the cardstock a lot or handled the cardstock a lot, those oils might be left on your paper. And then the embossing powder sticks to the oils left behind. So that is what the anti-static powder tool is for. It's to remove that any oils left from your fingers so that the embossing powder only sticks to the ink. That way you don't have little stray dots or fingerprints or smudges and stuff like that. Okay, we're going to do the top left-hand corner now, but I don't want any of the stamping to go onto the back. So I'm going to put a piece of Post-it tape on the back panel of my card base. And I'm going to put the ruler to the left now because that's where I'm going to need to make sure I have a good measurement. And we're going to start with the large blossom again. And you can see that it's going to stamp onto that Post-it tape, but when I remove the Post-it tape, voila, like magic, there will be none there. There will be no stamping there. And the top corner image is going to have fewer elements than the bottom right image did. And it's just kind of going to create this opposite, you know, the almost a frame, but not really because it's not going to go all the way around the sides of the cardstock. But it creates like a vantage point, a place for me to add a sentiment. Now, I will tell you right now, I should have done the sentiment first because the sentiment I chose to use didn't fit in the middle. I had to figure out how I was going to put that sentiment in. So note to self and anybody else who's interested, stamp your sentiment first so that you know where it's going to need to be stamped around. Okay, now that I have that large blossom in, I'm going to add the small blossom. I do want to add a leaf there as well, so I'm going to have to do that in 2 different steps because I'm going to need masks. That's the word, masks, for both of those stamps. And I almost forgot to put the mask back down, and then I would have had that stem on the top of the petals, and it would have looked messy. Although, to be fair, it probably would have looked okay-ish. It just would not have been the look I was going for. All right, adding my embossing powder, shaking it off. I do have a dry paintbrush in my drawer off to my right that I can brush any loose powder off of that Post-it tape so that when I remove the Post-it tape, it doesn't peel up any embossing on accident because, you know, it's a solid line. And now that I've heat set that, I can put the mask back, or I'll put the ruler back in so I have a good clean edge. I can put the mask on that small blossom and add my leaf, and then I decided I probably needed the mask of the larger blossom as well because I want this leaf kind of poking out from behind both flowers. Now, true story, looking at the card in real life, it's only kind of sort of noticeable. I could have skipped that entirely. But in my brain, it needed a leaf. So that's where I put the leaf. Once I have that stamped down, I can remove my masks. I can add the embossing powder and heat set that. And there's only a couple of stamps left to add to my image. On the left-hand side, I'm going to, after I've heat set this, I'm going to add another leaf and another of the small blossoms. But this time, I'm going to do the leaf first and mask it off and then add the small blossom so that the smaller blossom is actually behind the leaf. So it works. My masks are really, really, really not wanting to stick because of all of that anti-static powder in my tool. But there's enough adhesive on the back still, temporary adhesive on the back still, that it's working. It's a struggle, but it's working. Okay, so little blossom done, and then the leaf. And the leaf that is there, it kind of hangs just to the front of the last petal on that small blossom. So it's going to be perfect. I mean, I just love how it turned out. I did add the mask down to this blossom just in case the stem of the leaf was not where I thought it was in the stamp. You know, it's a photopolymer stamp, so sometimes it was me having an anxiety attack is what it was. But sometimes, you know, I don't always judge exactly where those images are going to line up. So this is the last of the stamping I'm going to do for a minute. And now I'm going to add a little bit of interest to this card by ink blending around the bottom and top corners of this panel. And I'm just using the darkest blue ink I have in my ink stash. This is an older Stampin' Up! Ink. It's called Midnight Muse, I think. I don't know if that's even still a color, but it was the darkest blue I had in my stash, even with my mini cubes. Most of my full-size stamp pads are from Stampin' Up! Or they are archival ink. And then I have lots of cubes that are altenew and My Favorite Things and Hero Arts, lots of other companies. I did just order, and I can't wait for them to get here, the Concord and 9th. I ordered the entire collection of their mini cubes, and I'm so excited. Their colors are fabulous. Okay, the stamp set I'm using for the sentiments is the Honeybee Stamps Inside Out Wedding Stamp Set. And I want to use the 2 stamps that say congratulations on your wedding day. And they're really long. And I did not plan a big enough space for, especially right in the center. So instead of chopping my stamps apart, which I have been known to do, little stamp surgery, never hurt any stamp, I decided to just go ahead and stamp these up in the top here where there's enough room to stack them right on top of each other like this. It works. I don't hate it. In fact, I kind of like it. It works. I am going to heat emboss them as well in that rose gold embossing powder from Simon Says Stamp. So I'm doing all of the same things I did before. I'm prepping the cardstock with my anti-static powder. I am using Versamark ink to do the stamping. Then I am dumping the embossing powder onto my cardstock over a piece of scrap paper, letting it sit and soak into the ink for a few seconds. And when I am done, I can funnel that embossing powder back into the little jar with that scrap paper. And then I can heat set the sentiment, and all is right in my world. Now, you've noticed that there is a ton of that embossing anti-static powder tool or anti-static powder on my card front. That comes off with a tissue, a Swiffer dust cloth, a microfiber rag. Heck, I've even rubbed it on my pants before. It brushes right off. Just make sure your embossing is set and cooled. And here is my card front. I am going to add a piece of white copy paper to the inside so that I do not have to write my sentiment in white gel pen because, well, it's messy. But I am going to stamp one of the stamps from this Inside and Out stamp set on the inside. And it's just one that says, "We're thrilled to be celebrating with you. It means so much to be a part of your big day." And that is absolutely true. I cannot wait to see her and celebrate with her. So once I get this stamped down into the card, I'm going to zoom in a little bit so that you can see the embossing powder. But it is very difficult to see with the lights in my craft room, as you can see in this photograph. So I did kind of do a little photo editing and take out the shiny so you could see the layout of the card. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I have a couple other videos here I think you might enjoy. I have added a subscribe button. If you have not subscribed to my channel, I would love it if you did. Leave me a comment down below. Do you love heat embossing? Have you ever tried it? And have a really fabulous day.